During 1964, throughout the production of The Sound of Music, one noise created havoc on location and almost ruined among the movie's most memorable moments. It wasn't theatrical or heartbreaking, it was humorous. Excessively humorous. So humorous that nobody could maintain their role. Scene following scene was wrecked. The company invested thousands attempting to resolve it, then decided to conceal the incident entirely. For years, it remained secret until Julie Andrews ultimately revealed the reality on broadcast television. What actually occurred in that pavilion, and why did Christopher Plummer, who despised the movie, consent to remain silent? Number 1. The European reception. The journey began modestly during the middle years of the 1950s. In 1956, Wolfgang Liebenheiner, a producer from Germany, launched two movies adapted from Maria von Trapp's autobiography, The Story of the Trapp Family Singers. The initial film was Die Trapp Family, with a follow-up arriving 12 months afterward. These were modest budget productions, emotionally touching, carrying a distinctly European sensibility. Yet they resonated deeply. In the aftermath of war, West German audiences yearned for narratives filled with warmth and optimism. These productions offered precisely that. Both pictures became extraordinary commercial triumphs. Actually, they represented West Germany's greatest financial film achievement during that period. The appeal extended beyond borders. The story proliferated rapidly throughout Europe and discovered audiences in South American territories. Audiences from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds identified with the portrayal of a singing Austrian household, resisting Nazi forces and selecting love instead of terror. However, when American production companies viewed these films, their response was underwhelming. Expressed diplomatically, Hollywood perceived the movies as resembling amateur theatrical productions, overly sentimental, excessively melodramatic, too distinctly foreign. Nobody rushed to adapt the Von Trapp narrative for United States audiences. That persisted until Vincent J. Dunhue entered the picture. Dunhue possessed exceptional credentials. Fresh from earning a Tony Award, he demonstrated remarkable talent for identifying emotionally powerful narratives. Paramount dispatched him to discover fresh material, and he coincidentally screened the German Trapp family productions. Initially, his reaction mirrored everyone else's, awkward and unpolished. Then something remarkable occurred. Underneath the limited budget and dated presentation, he recognized genuine substance. The narrative possessed authenticity. It contained emotional depth. Dunhue articulated something nobody had previously dared suggest. This cannot become a film. It must transform into a Broadway stage production, specifically for Mary Martin. That single statement initiated a transformation and sparked a sequence of events culminating in one of history's most significant musicals. Yet none of this would have materialized without Maria von Trapp making an exceptionally peculiar, arguably disastrous financial choice years before. Number 2, the modest financial agreement. Maria von Trapp lacked Hollywood connections entirely. She possessed no representation, no legal counsel protecting her interests. She simply sought to provide for her household. Therefore, when German producers approached during the early 1950s requesting to purchase her life narrative, she accepted receiving a single payment totaling merely $9,000. Presently, that figure appears insignificant, and indeed it was. Even considering 1950s currency values, the amount was modest. Inflation adjusted for contemporary times, it equals approximately $104,000. Reasonable for a straightforward transaction, but representing a minuscule portion of forthcoming revenues. Worsening matters, Maria had inadvertently relinquished more than she comprehended. Hollywood subsequently approached proposing to acquire her book's title, attempting to circumvent rights complications and simply adapt an inspired narrative. Maria remained firm. She demanded that any portrayal of her family's history must be accurate and complete, no selective adaptation. By the late 1950s, Mary Martin, Broadway's preeminent performer of that period, alongside her spouse Richard Halliday, were committed to staging the Von Trapp narrative. As circumstances developed, Maria von Trapp was located deep within Papua New Guinea's wilderness, conducting missionary activities with Father Franz Wasner, the family's established musical coordinator. Communication infrastructure was non-existent, no telephone access, no digital connectivity, solely handwritten correspondence. Those letters, Maria ignored them completely. Each time they reached another mission location, accumulated mail awaited them frequently, including correspondence from some American couple attempting to discuss Broadway opportunities. She destroyed them, quite literally. Maria held no interest in entertainment industry matters. Her concentration remained on serving remote populations, operating medical facilities, instructing music, and maintaining simplicity. Broadway occupied her thoughts minimally. Then an unexpected development occurred. Upon Maria and Father Wozner's eventual ship-based return to America, they arrived at San Francisco's port where Richard Halliday awaited them directly at the dock. He presented Maria with 2 tickets for viewing his wife's performance in Annie Get Your Gun. Maria consented to attend, likely from politeness. What she witnessed on stage overwhelmed her. Mary Martin demonstrated charm, strength, and magnetic presence. Maria felt moved, yet carried disappointing information to share. She clarified that German producers already owned the film rights from years earlier. That avenue was technically unavailable. Nevertheless, she provided the couple with surprising authorization. "You're permitted to attempt your best effort," she informed them. That single opportunity, one informal approval from Maria, would launch one of Broadway's greatest achievements. Number 3, the all-or-nothing proposition. When producers initially grew serious about converting Maria von Trapp's experiences into stage entertainment, their conception differed significantly. The approach involved combining authentic Austrian traditional music, resembling the actual melodies the Trapp family performed during concerts, with merely several new compositions for narrative cohesion. Imagine modest Broadway enhancement layered over traditional European appeal. However, when they contacted Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein about composing just 1 or 2 numbers, the celebrated partnership responded definitively. Rodgers and Hammerstein essentially stated they'd appreciate the offer but decline. "Either our contribution encompasses everything or we withdraw." They refused having their creations conflicting with traditional Austrian melodies. Complete involvement or nothing. That moment revolutionized everything. The producers paused production. Rodgers and Hammerstein needed to complete Flower Drum Song, so the new endeavor was temporarily postponed. Upon their eventual return to the Von Trapp narrative, they reconstructed the entire framework from foundation, featuring exclusively original compositions. Not merely any compositions. We're discussing enduring classics, including My Favorite Things Do, Re Mi Edelweiss, and Climb Every Mountain, melodies the global population continues performing presently. Then arrived premiere evening, November 16, 1959. The curtain lifted at Broadway's Lunt-Fontanne Theater, featuring Mary Martin portraying Maria and Theodore Bickel as Captain Von Trapp. Production expenses reached $400,000, a substantial investment during that period. Yet anticipation was extraordinary. Ticket purchases exploded, ultimately accumulating beyond $232 million in advance reservations exclusively. Consider that figure, exceeding $232 million. Before most individuals had viewed the production. Mary Martin rarely missed performances. She absented herself only once throughout the complete run. The production continued for 443 performances, nearly 4 years before concluding in June 1963. However, by summer 1960, something else intensified. A competitive bidding situation for cinematic rights. Studios recognized this transcended being merely successful. It represented a cultural phenomenon. 20th Century Fox emerged victorious, expending $1,250,000 for the rights equivalent to exceeding $13 million in current currency. That represented an astonishing figure, particularly for a studio experiencing severe difficulties. Why? Because Cleopatra Fox's prior massive budget production had nearly bankrupted them. It exceeded budget by $15 million and destroyed professional careers. Fox hemorrhaged finances, so their acquisition of the Sound of Music rights appeared insane to observers. Yet the agreement contained one subtle provision: if the picture generated more than $5 million, Rodgers and Hammerstein's estate would receive their cent of profits. Co-author Howard Lindsay actually laughed at this clause. He believed the movie would never approach that threshold. His prediction couldn't have been more mistaken. Now we approach one of Hollywood's greatest casting speculation scenarios. Number 4, Julie Andrews' vindication, Hollywood's massive error. By the early 1960s, Julie Andrews had already dominated theatrical performance. She was adored for portraying Eliza Doolittle in Broadway's My Fair Lady. Her vocal abilities were magnificent, her appeal unquestionable. However, when the moment arrived to transform My Fair Lady into cinema, Hollywood rejected her. Studio executives claimed she lacked camera appeal. Essentially, they believed she wasn't sufficiently glamorous for major screen presentation. Instead of selecting the woman who popularized the role, they chose Audrey Hepburn, a decision that shocked Broadway enthusiasts. Audrey possessed elegance certainly, but her singing couldn't match Julie's. Actually, most of her musical numbers in the picture required dubbing. Julie felt crushed. She had sustained My Fair Lady throughout years only to be dismissed at the crucial juncture. This represented the type of rejection that could have terminated a professional career. Yet destiny had alternative arrangements. During that identical period, director Robert Wise sought someone to portray Maria von Trapp in The Sound of Music. He remained unconvinced Julie was appropriate until someone at Disney presented him with an early version of Mary Poppins. The picture remained incomplete, but after viewing only several minutes, Wise addressed the screenwriter and stated we should secure her before others do. Julie received the Maria role offer for a fixed payment of $225,000. In contemporary currency, that equals approximately $2.28 million. It was reasonable compensation for an emerging performer, but here's the complication. No royalties existed, no performance bonuses, no box office percentage. Once she received that payment, that concluded everything. Meanwhile, Mary Martin, who had performed Maria on stage, had arranged a vastly different agreement. She accumulated more than $8 million from her Broadway profit share. Fox didn't consider Andrews a sufficiently prominent performer to warrant a back-end arrangement. That choice would return to haunt them because Mary Poppins proved to be an enormous success. Julie Andrews not only disproved the studio's assessment, she captured an Oscar for Best Actress. And upon accepting the award, she did something playful. She thanked Jack Warner, the very individual who had rejected her for My Fair Lady. It was a delightful, understated form of vindication, and the audience appreciated it. Still, The Sound of Music would become her most legendary role. And despite the film ultimately earning hundreds of millions globally, Julie never received a single dollar beyond that initial fixed payment. And she wasn't the sole individual Fox attempted to underpay. Number 5, the unwanted role. While Julie A. Andrews was already charming everyone during production, casting her on-screen counterpart was becoming a serious challenge. The Captain Georg von Trapp role should have been a desirable opportunity. He represented the attractive, contemplative widower who gradually develops feelings for Maria. However, here's the situation. No prominent actor desired to perform it. Robert Wise, the director, approached everyone. He contemplated Sean Connery, who had recently captivated audiences as James Bond. He also contacted Richard Burton, recognized for his powerful performances and his tumultuous relationship with Elizabeth Taylor. Even Bing Crosby was suggested as a candidate, yet none matched the atmosphere or essence of the production. Some declined, others simply seemed inappropriate. Then Christopher Plummer emerged. He possessed classical training, elegance, and sharpness, but he disliked the screenplay intensely. Actually, Plummer believed The Sound of Music was excessively sweet, overly sentimental. He labeled it The Sound of Mucus privately and rejected the role multiple times. The concept of portraying a strict, emotionally rigid father in a musical didn't appeal to him, but Robert Wise believed in his potential. So he traveled to London to persuade Plummer personally. Plummer consented, but only under one stipulation. He wanted to reconstruct the character. He informed the writers that Captain required additional depth, more emotional substance, superior dialogue, and most importantly, he needed his personal song, something displaying his emotional vulnerability. That's how Edelweiss became incorporated into the picture. It's not an Austrian traditional song as many assume. Rodgers and Hammerstein actually composed it for Plummer's character. The intention was providing the captain a subtle, intimate moment of vulnerability. Even with those modifications, Plummer still struggled. He subsequently acknowledged that he consumed alcohol throughout portions of the production. During filming of the family's significant farewell performance to the Nazis, arguably one of the most powerful sequences, Plummer was actually intoxicated. He stated it helped him manage the stiffness of the role. Despite all the conflict, his performance succeeded. He brought dignity and control to the captain, making the character's evolution from cold authoritarian to affectionate father feel authentic, and audiences embraced it. But here's an extraordinary twist. Christopher Plummer also had a fixed agreement. No royalties, no back-end arrangement. Just like Julie Andrews, he departed with a predetermined paycheck. As the picture proceeded to gross exceeding $286 million worldwide, both performers observed from the periphery, celebrated but received nothing beyond what was negotiated. And while the adults were managing contracts and revisions, the younger cast members were about to encounter their own turbulence. Number 6, Liesl Friedrich and Future Stars. The search for the Von Trapp children was far from straightforward, and the competition was intense. Consider the Liesel role, the eldest daughter. Remarkably, a young Mia Farrow auditioned 3 times. She was only 20, still youthful and delicate. The casting team's evaluations were direct, pleasant but lacking spark, insufficient energy, dancing abilities limited. That concluded it. Farrow was eliminated. Ironically, the woman who actually secured the part, Charmian Carr, was actually 21. Not years old, 21 years older than Farrow. Indeed, Carr was cast to portray 16 while already in her 20s, but she possessed something Farrow didn't, a confident radiance and graceful charm that illuminated every space. Missing out on The Sound of Music may have disappointed Farrow, but it created the opportunity for something even greater. Just several years later, she'd frighten the world in Rosemary's Baby, and her Hollywood trajectory would never be identical. Regarding Friedrich, the second oldest Von Trapp child, one of the actors who auditioned was Kurt Russell. Yes, the identical Kurt Russell who would subsequently become an action film star. Patty Duke and Terry Garr also submitted their candidacies. But ultimately, the role went to Nicholas Hammond, a thoughtful 15-year-old young man with a calm intensity the director appreciated. Years afterward, Hammond made history in a completely new manner. He became the very first live-action Spider-Man on television in 1977. The remaining Von Trapp children, they were carefully selected after exhausting auditions. The casting team searched for weeks, sometimes months, until they discovered precisely the right appearances, voices, and personalities. And what they constructed wasn't merely a cast, it was a family. Even decades afterward, the actors who portrayed the children remained connected. They reunited frequently, supported each other through life experiences, and maintained contact with both Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer until the very conclusion. Their connection felt genuine because it was genuine and the world recognized it. Number 7, the box office domination. For nearly 3 decades, one picture dominated Hollywood's financial performance like an invincible champion, Gone with the Wind. Since its premiere in 1939, it remained at the summit unchallenged through wars, prosperous periods, and technological innovations. Then arrived The Sound of Music. When it was premiered in 1965, nobody anticipated this outcome. But by November of 1990, just 18 months afterward, it had accomplished the impossible. It surpassed Gone with the Wind, accumulating an unprecedented $286 million at the international box office. And here's the factor that was not inflated contemporary currency. That was actual revenue based on ticket costs from the 1960s, which makes it even more remarkable. Expressed differently, The Sound of Music sold 283 million tickets worldwide. That's nearly 1 out of every 12 people alive during that period. People who didn't even understand English were humming do-re-mi in villages lacking electricity. Folks still recognize Edelweiss, and there was no viral promotion, no online trailers, no streaming services. Just word-of-mouth radio coverage, enthusiastic reviews, and families returning to view it a second, third, even 10th time. It became more than a picture. It became a worldwide phenomenon, a historical moment that people experienced together regardless of nation, language, or age. And then came the pinnacle, the Oscars. The Sound of Music dominated the Academy Awards, capturing 5 Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound, Best Editing, and Best Score. Director Robert Wise, who had already made impact with West Side Story, demonstrated that lightning could strike twice. This wasn't merely a light-hearted musical anymore. Critics had to acknowledge it. It was artistic achievement. Every technical element, every editing rhythm, every soft piano note and crisp footstep was observed and celebrated. However, what people didn't observe, what they were never intended to discover, was the chaos behind one of the film's most romantic sequences. Number 8, the gazebo scene catastrophe. The prohibited scene. The gazebo sequence between Maria and Captain Von Trapp is one of the most cherished romantic moments in cinema history. You recognize the one soft moonlight, quiet melody, a slow kiss, as they finally acknowledge their love. But what you don't realize is this. The scene was a complete catastrophe to produce. The problem, the lights, specifically the enormous carbon arc lights utilized to simulate moonlight. These were industrial equipment, bright hot and loud, really loud, and not just any type of loud. They generated a noise that sounded precisely like flatulence, a long, wet, flat raspberry. every single time Christopher Plummer leaned in to kiss Julie Andrews. Repeatedly. Julie stated they attempted 20 times, but the moment they got close to each other's faces, the lights emitted that same ridiculous sound. They couldn't stop laughing. Even the serious lines, "Maria, I love you," got destroyed by giggles. The entire crew was helpless. Hours elapsed. Nothing worked. Eventually, director Robert Wise surrendered. He abandoned the original plan. No more bright lighting. Instead, he decided to shoot the whole scene in silhouette. He positioned Julie and Christopher in front of the glowing gazebo windows. That way their faces were mostly concealed and their laughter didn't show. It ended up looking even more romantic. That glowing dreamlike style that wasn't intentional, it was damage control. And the studio, they didn't want anyone to discover. 20th Century Fox restricted information severely. Cast and crew were cautioned not to mention the noises, the laughter, or the failed attempts. For years, fans believed the scene had proceeded without a problem. The reality only emerged decades later when Julie Andrews finally shared the story on a talk show. She laughed at remembering it. "It's very difficult to be nose to nose doing a love scene and having these awful raspberries coming at you from below." But while the audience laughed, no one knew that Plummer himself was carrying a much heavier burden. Number 9. Plummer's hidden suffering. Christopher Plummer might have appeared calm and collected on screen, but behind the scenes, he was deeply miserable. He detested the sound of music. He labeled it gooey, ridiculed it as the sound of mucus, and even referenced it in interviews as just S&M. To him, the movie was excessively sentimental, totally inconsistent with the serious, demanding roles he wanted to pursue. And it was evident. Plummer often withdrew himself during filming in Salzburg. He once stated the picturesque city felt more like a prison of sentimentality than a European retreat. Part of that was his own choice. He consumed alcohol frequently and later admitted to gaining weight from all the rich food and alcohol. Still, he appeared always professional, even when he was intoxicated, which he openly confessed to in subsequent years. He stated some scenes were filmed while he was extremely drunk, including one of the most emotional moments in the movie. But somehow, in the middle of all his resentment, Plummer delivered a performance that would become legendary, the intoxicated scene that made everyone emotional. There's a moment in the picture that affects everyone emotionally when Captain Von Trapp sings Edelweiss with tears in his eyes during the festival. It feels so authentic, so heartfelt. But here's the twist. Christopher Plummer was completely drunk when they filmed it. He confessed in his 2008 memoir, In Spite of Myself, that he had been drinking heavily that day. He called himself a young and arrogant bastard who had no real connection to the film's sentimental tone. And yet he managed to deliver a performance that moved millions. And that's the irony. The scene many fans point to as proof of his character's emotional transformation was carried by an actor who could barely stand straight. Hollywood magic at its finest, or its most bizarre. But that wasn't even the biggest blow to his pride. Number 10. The voice that wasn't his. You recognize those sequences where Captain Von Trapp sings, "Yeah, that's not Plummer singing." At least not predominantly. Turns out the high notes and extended vocal parts were performed by Bill Lee, a professional singer who also did vocals for Disney movies like Sleeping Beauty and Mary Poppins. Plummer's speaking voice was used for transitions and dialogue. But when the real singing began, especially in Edelweiss, Lee took over. Plummer was enraged. He felt the decision undermined his performance. But the producers didn't think he could handle the vocal demands, and they weren't taking risks. Ironically, most fans never noticed. Lee's voice blended so seamlessly that people still believed they're hearing Plummer sing. By the time the movie premiered, Plummer was so annoyed he could barely say the film's name without an eye roll. But decades later, he admitted the film had charmed him in the end. It just took a few decades and a lot of time away from the spotlight for him to see the impact it had on the world. And while Plummer was quietly battling his own demons, things on set were getting dangerously real for others too. Number 11. The day little Gretel nearly drowned. Filming in Salzburg wasn't just emotionally exhausting, it was physically hazardous. During the boat scene where the Von Trapp children fall into the lake, 5-year-old Kim Karath, who portrayed little Gretel, nearly drowned. Here's what truly occurred. Just before shooting, the crew informed Julie Andrews that Kim couldn't swim. So the strategy was for Andrews to fall toward the child when the boat tipped and grab her immediately. But when the boat flipped, everything went wrong. Andrews fell backward away from Gretel. Kim slipped under the water twice before another actor jumped in to pull her out. She ended up vomiting from swallowing lake water and developed a fear of swimming that lasted for years. Even Julie Andrews was shaken. She later called the incident one of the scariest moments on set. But Gretel wasn't the only one who took a hit filming those now iconic scenes, the magical opening scene that slammed Julie Andrews into the ground. We all remember it, Julie Andrews' arms outstretched, twirling through a green alpine meadow as the camera soars above her. It looks peaceful, joyful, like something out of a dream. But here's what the audience didn't see. To get that sweeping aerial shot, a helicopter had to fly just 20 feet above her. Each time it circled around the wind, from the blades slammed Andrews flat into the grass. She was knocked over again and again, at least 6 or 7 times, and had to keep getting up, brushing off dirt and smiling like nothing happened. She later joked in interviews that she was almost launched into Austria. The scene looked magical, but filming it felt like a full-body tackle from the sky. Number 12. A beautiful catastrophe in Salzburg. Filming in Salzburg appeared like a fantasy. Rolling hills, perfect meadows, fairy tale castles. It was the ideal location for a musical. But behind the beauty was a nightmare. The original budget for the film was $8.2 million, already expensive for the mid-1960s. But no one warned the crew that Salzburg had some of the worst weather in Europe. 1964 turned out to be one of the wettest years on record. Director Robert Wise thought they could complete location shooting in 6 weeks. It ended up taking 11. Rain delays brought everything to a standstill. Over 250 cast and crew members sat around in soggy clothes, wasting time and burning through the budget. The cost of hotel rooms, equipment, repairs, extra meals, and rising wages made the studio executives sweat. Fox was already reeling from the disaster that was Cleopatra, and now this cheerful little musical was threatening to explode just as badly. One studio insider even whispered, "This movie might be the end of us." But there was one more unexpected disruption that made things even riskier. Number 13, the director who departed long before Robert Wise was hired. The legendary director William Wyler was supposed to lead The Sound of Music. In early 1963, he even resigned his position on Fox's board to avoid a conflict of interest. That's how serious it appeared. But Wyler had reservations from the beginning. He didn't appreciate the stage musical. He didn't feel connected to the script. Even when he flew to New York to see the Broadway production, he left confused. The songs didn't feel natural to him. They just didn't fit the story. He stated there was something else too. Wyler was losing his hearing. It made directing a musical even harder. His wife could see it clearly. He just wasn't into it. So Wyler began quietly looking for a way out. He needed a clean break, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. That's when producers offered him The Collector, based on the John Fowles novel. Wyler read the script and instantly knew this was more his style. Dark, twisted, psychological. He asked the Zanuck family, who were running the studio, to release him from his Sound of Music contract. The official story: scheduling conflicts. That's what the press was told. That's what Fox repeated. But the truth was Wyler ran the other way. And that left the door wide open for Robert Wise, who stepped in late 1963 to pick up the pieces. Thanks for watching, fam. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Check out the next video that pops up on your screen.